Hello, my name is Derek Williams. I want to talk about Thanksgiving, with it only being 2 days away. And I also want to show my King James Pure Bible Search software, as well as try out this new program I got for screen recording and also being able to see my video or myself in the video with the webcam. So before I go into it too far, I'm going to type in something over here. Sometimes I have trouble finding what I'm wanting to find, but I usually get it eventually. But let's start off. I'm going to type over here in the search area. And the thing that hath been. There it is. I got it first try that time. Okay. If you look here, I want to highlight it. Ecclesiastes 1:9. The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be. And that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. I want you to keep that verse in mind as we go through this. Having said that, I want to show you just a little bit of American history, and we're going to start with Columbus, and we're going to look at the Pilgrims, because I think they are both important. And all this information from the same webpage. I'm going to show you the webpage in a second. I'm going to pin it in the description so y'all can go to the website too and look at things for yourselves. A main source for information about Columbus, it comes from his contemporary Bishop Bartolome de Las Casas. Las Casas fearlessly criticized many fellow Spaniards, yet he did little but praise his mariner. His mariner would be Christopher Columbus. It says he was calm and serious, friendly to strangers, gentle and kind to his family. In nearly everything he undertook to plan or to accomplish, he would begin with, "In the name of the Holy Trinity, I will do this or to that." He fasted most observantly on all the fast days of the church. He participated frequently in confession and communion. He prayed at all the daily canonical hours, just as the priests and monks did. He was extremely zealous for the honor and glory of God. With deep longing, he yearned for the evangelization of these peoples and for the planking and flourishing everywhere of people's faith in Jesus Christ. Now, most people think that America was founded by a bunch of evil white guys that had nothing but greed in their heart. And I'm not going to say there wasn't any of them that were greedy. I'm certain there was some. But what I want to focus on here is that Columbus said himself, and other people said about him, that he was interested in spreading the gospel. Was he misguided? Oh yes, sadly he was misguided to some, but he was very zealous in his beliefs. He meant to do good for God and for God's glory, not just for himself. Now, why do I say he was misguided? Well, because the Catholic faith has a lot of theological problems when it comes to Christianity. It goes on to say here, indeed, he saw himself as on an evangelistic mission. In the prologue to his account of the first voyage, Columbus wrote to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. So these are Columbus's words. "I have given a report to your highness about the lands of India, and about a prince who is called Great Khan, how many times he and his predecessor had sent to Rome to ask for men learned in our holy faith in order that they might instruct him in it. And thus so many peoples were lost, falling into idolatry and accepting false and harmful religions. And your highness, as Catholic Christians and princes, lovers and promoters of the holy Christian faith, thought of sending me, Cristobal Colon, to see how their conversation to our holy faith might be undertaken." Now, Cristobal Colon was how he called himself. We have Americanized the word into, or Anglicized, however you want to say it, Cristobal Colon to Christopher Columbus. And he was very sincere in his faith, but he really did think that he had been to India. He really did think that he was seeing the Great Khan of China and all these other people. He really thought that he had sailed around the world to Asia. In fact, when I was reading this, it said that even at the end of his life, he still had thought that he had gone to Asia and refused to believe that he had gone to some other land other than that. But it says here that Columbus thirsted for gold. He was obsessed by it. When he says sincerely, "Our Lord in his goodness guides me so that I may find this gold," we cringe. But writers who accuse Columbus of raw greed miss part of the point. Columbus wanted gold not only for himself, but also for a much larger reason, to pay for the medieval Christian's dream, the retaking of the Holy Land. The primary motivation in his quest for gold was spiritual, argues Delano C. West. And I got this information from a website called ChristianHistoryInstitute.org. Now I'm going to go to their actual website, if it'll let me, and read to you about the Pilgrims. This is called The Real History of the Pilgrims. I want to actually go through this website. I'm going to read this whole article. It's not that long. And then we'll go back together and look at some scriptures. How did Thanksgiving come to be celebrated in the United States? Thanksgiving officially became the holiday we celebrate today in 1941. So we didn't even actually make this an official holiday until 1941. People have been celebrating it for longer than that. But we must look further back to uncover the true origins of Thanksgiving. I get tongue-tied. If we rewind to the year 1789, we find President George Washington beginning a trend that would ultimately result in the formation of the American holiday. Washington set the stage for American leaders to beseech the American people to set aside a day of public thanksgiving and prayer. To go even further back in history is to discover a group of people who would lay the foundation on which a fledgling nation would grow and from which a holiday for gratitude and prayer would be created. So who were the Pilgrims? The term Pilgrims was not given to this particular group of people until much later. For clarity, the Pilgrims we are referring to in this article are a group of people who met in Scrooby, England, in the early 1600s, and sat under the teachings of Mr. Richard Clifton. At the time, it was the law that every Englishman had to attend services at the Church of England, because England and the Catholic Church had a schism. The Church of England broke off from the Church, the Catholic Church, and there was just so many different problems as the Protestant movement was moving and flourishing throughout England. So, continue. However, there were two groups of English people who felt their government church needed to be reformed. The first group was called the Puritans. They felt the Church of England could be changed or purified from within. The second group were the Separatists, who felt the church's condition was beyond remedy. This group was, according to the separatist William Bradford, there's his name, they were hunted and persecuted on every side. So as their former afflictions were but as flea bitings in comparisons of these which now came upon them. For some were taken and clapped up in a prison. Others had their houses beset and watched night and day, and hardly escaped their hands, and the most were fain to flee and leave their houses and habitations, and the means of their livelihood. In short, the Scrooby congregation endured the horrors of religious persecution. In addition to it being the law to attend the Church of England, it was also illegal to leave England without the king's permission. So when the separatists decided to flee England, it was at considerable risk. Their first attempt resulted in capture, the loss of their possessions, and prison. Their second attempt resulted in the women being captured while the men successfully made it to the ship they had hired. Eventually, the group did make it to Amsterdam, Holland, and later recalled it to Leiden. Let me check my phone real quick. My wife may be getting off work. Nope, it's nothing. The Mayflower Voyage. During their years in Holland, the congregation grew to around 300 people. In 1620, 102 people boarded the Mayflower to make the journey to the New World. To fund the voyage, the congregation indentured themselves to a group of English merchants. The merchants chartered the Mayflower while the congregation purchased the Speedwell. The two ships set sail but had to return around twice because the Speedwell was leaking. On September 6, 1620, after finally resolving to abandon the failing Speedwell, the Mayflower alone sailed to the New World. There were many perils to be found in the sea in 1620. Pirates might try to board the ship and take over. Severe storms caused widespread damage and shipwrecks. It was not uncommon for passengers to become ill or fall overboard, both of which could be fatal. The Mayflower was a cargo ship, not at all comfortable for passengers. It was cold, damp, dark, and smelly. On top of the brutal conditions, a voyage that should have taken 33 days took 66 days because of violent storms encountered along the way. The Mayflower had initially set off for Virginia, intending to land near what we know today as New York City at the mouth of the Hudson River. But storms and rough seas caused them to land farther north. The Mayflower finally made it to Cape Cod Bay, anchoring near what is now Provincetown, Massachusetts, in the middle of November. The Mayflower Compact. To honor their agreement to settle in the northern parts of Virginia, the ship attempted to sail south. They encountered the dangerous waters of Pollack's Rip, a place along the east coast of North America where there are more shipwrecks than any other location on the eastern seaboard. Fearing for their lives, they decided to turn back to Provincetown. In addition to the Separatist congregation, there were other passengers who had come on the voyage to make a life in the New World. This group William Bradford refers to as strangers. The strangers knew they did not have to honor the patent, which was the agreement to settle in northern Virginia because they were far from it. This was concerning to the Separatists, who understood that the groups needed each other if they were to survive. The strangers and the Separatists were able to come to an agreement that honored both parties. Today we call this agreement the Mayflower Compact. The compact bears a resemblance to a sermon given to the Separatists by their pastor John Robinson. Before their departure, it lays forth the establishment of a civil body politic and a means to establish just and equal laws, ordinances, acts, constitutions, and offices for the general good of the colony. This is what would become known as the compact form of government, which is the basis for the American Declaration of Independence and the American Constitution. The first winter in Plymouth. November in New England meant that the people of the new colony would not be able to plant crops for the following year. It meant that they did not have shelter against the brutal New England weather. The captain of the Mayflower had mercy on them and agreed to stay anchored in the harbor until they could get their shelters built. After several exploration trips, the company agreed to settle in a place with a view of the harbor, home to a spring of fresh flowing water, with land that had already been cleared for crops. The town is now known as Plymouth, Massachusetts. However, they found themselves in terrible conditions. Sickness came upon both the company and the sailors, with as many as 2 to 3 people dying every day. The company was reduced to half. Additionally, they had only brought enough food for the voyage. As the sickness ravaged the people, they buried their dead in the darkness of night to hide how much of their company was gone. Despite their cold, starving, and frail state, when the Mayflower finally departed in April of 1621, not a single separatist returned to England with it. So, look at that. They were very determined to be able to have freedom to worship God as they saw fit, and not to be forced into some religion, such as what the Church of England had, that they felt wasn't a true religion that honored God. That's how dedicated they were to the God of... So dedicated they were to God. I don't know what to say. That's true dedication. To risk that kind of death and everything, and seeing people dying around you, and you say, I don't even care, I'm going to stay. That's dedication. We need to see some dedication from Christians today. The Pilgrims' relationship with Native Americans. Samoset was the first Native American the Pilgrims encountered. He spoke some English and was able to tell them of another man, Squanto, who would become their close friend. Squanto had been kidnapped by English traders, enslaved, and lived as a servant in England. He eventually escaped and returned to his home, only to find his people had perished from a plague. Squanto facilitated a meeting with the great Sachem Massasoit, who was the leader of the Wampanoag tribe. Squanto came to live within the colony and taught the people how to plant corn and other crops, hunt, and more. In his journal, William Bradford speaks highly of his friendship with Squanto, calling him a special instrument of God for their good. Edward Winslow, also a separatist, cultivated a deep friendship with Massasoit. In fact, in 1623, Massasoit fell ill, despite being told that the chief had already passed away. Winslow proceeded into the chief's house. Winslow then gave him medicine, scraped the inside of his swollen mouth, and gave him a drink. Eventually, Massasoit was able to eat some soup Winslow prepared and went to make a full recovery. Massasoit remained a close friend of Winslow and an ally of the colony until his death. Ultimately, the separatists and the natives were able to form a peace treaty that lasted over 50 years. The treaty was to the benefit of both parties, each seeking to honor the other. The treaty was very simple. It said that neither he, Massasoit, nor any of his should injure or do hurt to any of the Pilgrim people. And if any of his did hurt to any of ours, he should send the offender that we might punish him. That if any of our tools were taken away when our people were at work, he should cause them to be restored. And if ours did any harm to any of his, we would do like to them. If any did unjustly war against him, we would aid him. If any did war against us, he should aid us. He should send to his neighbor confederates to certify them of this, that they might not wrong us, but might be likewise comprised in the conditions of peace. That when their men came to us, they should leave their bows and arrows behind them, as we should do our pieces when we came to them. Lastly, that doing this, King James would esteem of him, Massasoit, as his friend and ally. The legacy Pilgrims is more than Thanksgiving. After surviving the first winter of illness, cold, and starvation, the Pilgrims were able to produce their first harvest and chose to set aside a day to celebrate the providential hand of God. There was not much written on the first feast that we refer to as Thanksgiving. What we do know comes mostly from Edward Winslow's writing, Mort's Relation. In it, Winslow describes a successful hunt that yielded enough food to feed the colony for almost a week. It was at this time that Massasoit and 90 of his braves joined in the celebration, bringing with them 5 deer as a gift. William Bradsford, of Plymouth Plantation, while not discussing the feast we call Thanksgiving, describes their harvest of 1621 as small, but with an abundance of cod, bass, and other fish, as well as fowl and venison. After the loss of so many of their companions, Bradford rejoiced at their renewed health and strength, saying, "The company had all things in good and plenty." I think that's just amazing right there, that they would have faced so much loss, but instead of focusing on all the loss they had, they just praised God for the good they did have. So while the primary sources we have don't go into great detail about the feast, we do know that the Pilgrims were both thankful for what they had and gave all credit to God, who had provided for them. The bottom line, what we can learn from the first Thanksgiving and the courageous Pilgrims from Scrooby, England. Throughout American history, and especially in the Pilgrim story, we can see God working, bringing forth his plans and purposes. Additionally, the Pilgrims showed love, care, and respect to the natives, whom they viewed as their equals. We can show that the same Christian care and brotherly love to our neighbors. Lastly, we must seek out the truth of America's rich history from primary sources so that we can learn from it, distinguish what is true, and share it with others so that we never forget the price that was paid for our own liberty. Now, if I can find it real quick, I want to focus on one thing real quick that was said. Remember what it said up here. Why did they come to America? Bradford also tells us that ultimately the Pilgrims wanted to share the gospel with others. So they saw themselves as stepping stones to the advancement of the Christian faith. I think they would be heartbroken to see what America has become today, where we're starting to see persecution. I mean, I don't know how to say it. Some persecution of Christians even in this nation. And it's not at the level that the saints of old saw, like in the disciples' days. But when you have people being sued just because they don't want to bake a cake that goes contrary against their own beliefs, I mean, that's a problem. Or as an Arizona pastor that just got shot the other day because he was preaching in the street, preaching the gospel. Somebody didn't like it, so they shot him. Thankfully, he's still alive, last I heard, and I pray for that man that he'll pull through. But my whole thing that I want to get at is, why did we come over here in the first place? Not just to give thanks to God. We need to give thanks to God in all things. But why did we come here in the first place? Because that's what we're supposed to remember with Thanksgiving, is what brought us to this land in the first place. And also to give God thanks. Why would God want us here? There are so many people that talk about how We shouldn't ever came here. All we did was took away the land from the Indians. Whose land is the land in the first place anyway? It's not the whole world God's. He can give it to who he please. He's the one that... Well, let me just read a verse. Let me read a verse. That's what I like about this. Let's see here. Oh, I forgot to erase all of it. Well, it's going slow. Well, maybe I'm remembering the wording just a little bit wrong, but I'll see it in just a second. I know it's in Daniel. What I'm looking for is in Daniel. So let's find it right quick. I want to show this to you. So when people try to say that it's just wrong what people did when they came over here, let's look. Here it is, Daniel 2:21. Daniel's telling the king Nebuchadnezzar, talking of God, and he being God, changeth the times and the seasons. He removeth kings and setteth up kings. He giveth wisdom to the wise and knowledge to them that know understanding. So who's the one that removes nations, sets up nations? Same one that removes kings and sets up kings. He does all these things. Now, think about Israel. Remember what I told you to remember in the first place. The thing that which was is the thing that shall be. There's no new thing under the sun. Why did Israel come into the land of Canaan? And it wasn't just because God made a promise to Abraham. I mean, that's the main reason. But God wouldn't give Abraham the land of Canaan at the very beginning. In Genesis 15:16, I hope y'all can read these things I'm pointing out. But in the fourth generation, yeah, this is God talking to Abraham. He's saying that, talking about Abraham's descendants going into Egypt. And he says, but in the fourth generation they shall come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. So God was saying that the sins that were happening in Canaan, they weren't bad enough yet for God to punish them and to destroy them yet. He's given them time to repent, to turn away. God knew they wouldn't, but he's a God of mercy, and he still allowed them to have that chance. And their iniquity wasn't yet full. But look what happened to the Israelites. They got to go in and take the land, and eventually they got kicked out too. Why did they get kicked out? Well, it's because they started going in and doing a lot of these sins. It says in Judges 2:13, they forsook the Lord and served Baal and Ashtaroth. Now, who are Baal and Ashtaroth? Well, Baal, if you do any studying at all, you'll learn that Baal, he's a god of all kinds of perversion. He would have sodomite prostitutes at the temples. That's a male prostitute. He would have his people come in and have orgies at the temple. He would do all these things, and it's just so perverse and so wrong. And you see the same thing happening today in our culture. There is no right or wrong. They're doing all these things, just like they were in the days of Israel. And one of the things with the LGBT movement is all the letters. And I think it's mostly recognized in Canada more so than here. But, you know, you got like LGBTQIA plus 2S. Anyway, the 2S one, I don't know how often that gets used, but I know it's part of it. Stands for two-spirited. And in the Indian cultures, especially the ones further north from my understanding, was that they recognized that there were people that had two spirits. They may be male, but they were also female, if that makes any sense to you. Look at us today. We got the transgenderism movement. Then you got Ashtaroth. In other places they call her Asherah. She's also predominantly called the Queen of Heaven. Guess what we tend to call her today? Mother Nature. How many people are worshiping Mother Nature today? You're like, well, I don't know if any. Yeah, they do. Trust me. You got people going out and they're making a big fuss about making sure we don't cut down trees. Don't be sucking up the oil. Don't be doing this or that or the other. Hey, if you kill a sea turtle egg, they should be charged millions and millions of dollars. But hey, if they want to be able to kill their baby in the womb, hey, they should have freedom to do that. So we're elevating nature above man. Nature above man. And man is supposed to have dominion over nature. That's the way God set in that order. But we're going completely against it. So anyway, we got Bel and Asherah. You're like, well, what's that got to do with the Indians? Well, there's another one that I haven't mentioned. Another God I haven't mentioned that the Canaanites were serving, that Israel started dealing with. And that's Molech. In Leviticus 18:21, it says, and thou shalt not let any of thy seed pass through the fire to Molech, neither shalt thou profane the name of the Lord thy God. I am the Lord. But if we look, let's see. Let's see if I can't find this king's name. So we got a king of Judah. King went up from the house of the Lord, and all the men of Judah, and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem with him, and the priests and the prophets, and all the people, both small and great. And the king stood by a pillar. I'm not sure which king this is, but he was praising the, let's see. They were burning incense to Baal, to the sun, to the moon, to the planets, and all the host of heaven. They made a grove in the house of the Lord. Things that they were doing. Oh, this is talking about a good king. He came in and destroyed all this stuff. But they were also burning their sons and daughters to Molech in the fire. Let's see. Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, in the hill that is before Jerusalem, and for Molech, the abomination of the children of Ammon. And likewise did he for all the strange wives which burn incense and sacrifice to their gods, unto their gods. So even Solomon started following after these other gods. Now, I want you to think about the Native Americans that were here. Okay, we had people that were dedicated to God, mostly Protestants trying to come to America. And I'm talking about the United States of America. Mostly Protestants. There were some Catholics too. And they were concerned with spreading the gospel and living for God and telling people about God. And at first, the Indians and the Christians, they were getting along good. But the Indians ended up not liking the Christians. There's different reasons. Sometimes the white man were pretty mean to them. But sometimes it was the Indians. They had problems with it. And the problem is that they served many gods. You cannot have lightness commune with, or darkness commune with light. It just don't work. You can't mix light and dark together. And the Indians were serving gods of darkness. They were serving gods that required human sacrifice. They were serving gods. What do we know most about Indians? That they worshipped nature. They tried to stay in harmony with nature. They worshipped the creation instead of the creator, which is something we're told not to do. So they were worshiping nature. They're worshiping several gods. They had a belief in people could be two-spirited, which I explained that. Thought they could be both male and female. They were killing people and sacrifice to other gods. They were doing all these things that God sent Israel in to destroy the people that were doing those before them, and then he had to punish Israel because they started doing the same things. And so, in God and his mercy, and this is my honest to God belief, God in all his mercy sent people from Europe who believed in him to the Americas to bring the gospel to all these lost heathen that were living in these two continents. And many rejected it. There were some that didn't, but many rejected it. And God, because we were serving and honoring him, set us up in dominion over the Indians that were already here, the natives. But look at us today. We have fallen away. Romans chapter 1. Let's see if I can find what I want to read. Okay, let's start with verse 16 here. Okay, let's just do this a little bit right here. Paul says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. For therein is the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, the just shall live by faith. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who hold the truth in unrighteousness, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse, because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man, and to birds, and to four-footed beasts, and creeping things." So these people all made themselves all idols. And God tends to start destroying people who do that, but we're focusing on thanksgiving, not the judgment of God. So let's look at some words about thanks. So I'll just type thank, and I'm going to put an asterisk here so it'll give me different forms of the word thank. Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endureth forever. I think that's a great verse. Remember his mercy. Now therefore, our God, we thank thee and praise thy glorious name. That's 1 Chronicles 29:13. I want to look at some Proverbs, though, about thanks. So let's go down to some Proverbs, because I'm sure that Proverbs got some things about being thankful. Proverbs is a very good book. I'm wrong. I just assumed it would have. Psalm 147 verse 7 says, "Sing unto the Lord with thanksgiving, sing praise upon the harp unto our God. Surely the righteous shall give thanks unto thy name. The upright shall dwell in thy presence." Let's see. Let me try this. Oh. Something in the New Testament. Let's find something in the New Testament for you. "But we are bound to give thanks always to God for you, brethren, beloved of the Lord, because God hath from the beginning chosen you to salvation through the sanctification of the Spirit and belief of the truth." So think about that and how we should be so thankful that there are other Christians out there. This is the verse I was trying to find. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 18. I want to leave you with this. "In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you." See, we have problems. We're living in a wretched world where people have turned so far away from the truth that it's just hard to see how it could ever be reconciled back to God. But with God, all things are possible. And you might be having problems. You might be having financial issues. You might be having family that are falling away or following after those alternative lifestyles that the Bible says is wrong. And it's just breaking your heart. But remember God, how merciful He is. And unless they're dead and gone, you still have hope for them. So let's remember that in everything we give thanks this holiday season. And I encourage you, when you get together with your family, if they won't pray as a family, you pray in front of every one of them. Say something about what God has done for you. Let other people know that God is real in your life. And whether they want to acknowledge it or not, He's real in their lives too. Hope this has been encouraging for y'all. Hope you enjoy it. God bless y'all, and y'all have a great Thanksgiving.